communication. We talked about listening. That was primarily what we talked about last week. The whole lesson was, it was kind of a 2-week thing on how to communicate, the fact that we're always communicating whether we think we are or not. And whether we're in a family situation, spouse, kids, parents, whatever, how important listening is. What I really wanted to focus on last week, and I don't know if I really did or not, was about how we need to be effective communicators in a spiritual sense. I mean, that when we're talking about sharing our faith, that we've got to be willing to listen to people's questions, willing to listen to people's perspectives. And we talked about the idea of just, I don't remember what the phrase was I used, speaking your mind, saying, here's what I want to say, and I'm going to say it, and hearing the other person out, which, we kind of have that connotation of, I'm not really listening, I'm just going to let you finish your sentence so then I can tell you what I want to say. How, I won't say especially, but we need to consider that when it comes to how we share our faith, that we've got to be good listeners as well as good communicators, but part of that is being willing just to sit and listen to another person's perspective. Even if it's different than ours, even if we're sure we're right, we still have to be willing to listen to each other. So this week, our topic is change. And it's not that kind of change, but it's a better picture than just the word change, which you'll see in a minute. But when we think about change in a spiritual sense, when you think about change in the church, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Slow. It's slow. Change can be slow. When you maybe I should say it this way: when you talk about change in the church, is that usually a negative or a positive? Negative. We usually tend to think of change in a negative way for some reason. What we want to look at this morning is the positive, I guess, the positive side of change. The fact that as Christians, as we mature, as we develop as Christians, change is something that we ought to be looking to do. I mean, that we ought to be looking for in our lives. We have to understand, and really whether it's us personally or within our congregations, change isn't a negative thing. I mean, there can be negative change. I mean, there can be change for change's sake. There can be, change to do things incorrectly. But for what we want to talk about this morning, we want to think about the positive nature of change. In 2 Kings chapter 20, King Hezekiah is kind of full of himself at this point. And the Babylonian envoy comes. There's the whole group of Babylonians come. And do you remember what Hezekiah does when they start asking him about how wealthy he is? Remember what he did? He goes and shows them all of his treasure. Takes them to the storehouses of the temple and shows them how much wealth he has. And God wasn't happy with that. God was like, actually Isaiah comes to him and says, "What are you doing? Why did you just tell these people how much wealth we have when we know they're ravaging conquerors? I mean, you just gave them an invitation. Here, come rob us." That's basically what it comes down to. And in 1 Kings chapter 20, verse 19, after Isaiah tells him this, Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "The word of the Lord that you have spoken is good." For he thought, because what Isaiah tells him is, okay, now all of your wealth is going to be taken away. Everything that you have, everything that Israel is going to be taken away by the Babylonians. Hezekiah goes, okay, yeah, I guess that's great. But here's what it says at the end of the chapter, or the end of verse. For he thought, why not, if there will be peace and security during my lifetime? So he's basically like, okay, well, big deal. As long as, while I'm alive, everything's going to stay the same. That is the attitude that I think we see in the church a lot. I think we see it in ourselves a lot. What happens in 30 years, I'm not going to have to deal with that as long as everything's okay in my lifetime. As long as things don't have to change. That's really what Hezekiah is saying. as long as things stay the status quo while I'm around, who cares if I lose all my wealth and prosperity? I'll be dead anyway, so what difference does it make? So the attitude there is one that we need to avoid, obviously, but what the Bible shows us is that change is healthy. Change, and I guess thinking more of our individual personal lives, change is necessary for us often. You think about, what it takes to become a Christian. There's got to be some changes. You have to look at, whether you're a good person living a good life, you still have to change your thinking about God. You still have to put God in the place of lordship. You have to put Jesus as the king of your life. So, we think of repentance. Usually when we use the term repentance, it brings to mind turning away from your terrible life of sin. That's not always what it is. It's sometimes changing the way you think about God and just saying, okay, Jesus is in charge now, I'm not. So even as we begin our life of faith, there's changes that have to happen. So I'm going to look at 4 different ideas that we really need to think about when we talk about change and what that means for us spiritually and what it can mean for us as a congregation. Brad, can I put you on the spot and ask you to lead us in prayer? Any prayer requests? And we've got just gobs of stuff going on. VBS, Mountain States is next week. Remember the Spriggle family in your prayers. Just remember that extended family in your prayers right now. Anything else? Anyone? All right, Brad, if you would lead us in prayer.
Dear God, thank you so much for your blessings and this earth that you put before us. That's whether we can enjoy this whole building that we can come and learn more about you. And please be with Clint as he presents the class. And we ask that you comfort the Spriggle family after their devastating loss. And we also ask that VBS is a success and that the camps coming up are also a success, and be with everyone traveling for the summer. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Yeah. Speaking of camp, the work day was yesterday, and we have our first group coming into camp Thursday, and it does not look like it at all right now. It's bizarre. There's still concrete to be poured around the lodge thing, but Wes Blackmer, he's done some amazing things, just woodworking stuff. For those of you who've been to camp, the incredibly safe flap that covers canteen. He removed that. I don't know why you'd remove that, but now there's just gonna be nice saloon type doors. That sounds bad. It's a bad way to say. I don't know what a saloon looks like, but I'm just saying. But the kitchen area, the where you go in to get your food, where the line is, the outside wall is actually going to have real windows. Like Max Miller was looking at him yesterday, and he goes, "These are glass." Yeah, look at us. So a lot of improvements, a lot of change going on at camp. So that's a terrible segue, but I'll use it anyway. So when we think about change, one of the things that when we think about changing our lives spiritually, and again, we don't always, let's not think of changing our lives spiritually. Let's not think of that in a way that sounds negative. We tend to say that, and what we sound like we're saying is we're doing something really, really bad, so we need to change our lives. Well, part of change spiritually is just maturing. It's just improving. It's getting better. So one of the things that the recognition of a need for change and making the effort to change, one of the things it shows is a positive outlook, that I have this mentality that I can get better. You've probably heard this illustration that I think I've used it here before. It's a big preacher life story. It's just an illustration. But the story of the guy that his wife is making a ham for dinner and she cuts off both ends of it. And he's like, why do you do that? And she goes, well, that's what my mom did. And he decides, I'm going to find out why. That doesn't seem to make any sense. So he calls mother-in-law. Why do you do that? She goes, well, that's what my mom did. So he calls grandma then. He's like, why do you cut the ends off the ham? She goes, well, I don't know why they do it. The pan that I cooked ham in was too small. So, I mean, it became this thing that you thought, well, that's what you're supposed to do. When I went to Ukraine in 2000, the church building in Avdiivka was about half the size of this room. And some people from Broken Arrow had been there 3, I think, times before that, had helped to start the congregation right outside Donetsk, this big city. And our second day there, I think, we went to the church building and came in, and there was this husband and wife that were there waiting for us to greet us and everything. And the husband immediately took Scott, the guy that had been there before, one of our ministers, took Scott aside and was like, had to tell him something. You could tell it was real important, a big, tense discussion. And Scott walks away, and he comes walking toward me, and he goes, I was like, wow, that looked really serious. I mean, it was a really intense discussion. And their Lord's Supper table had been moved over against the wall. And people were upset about it. Because when those people from America came and helped start the congregation here, they put it here. So you moved it. So we're probably pagans now. I mean, there was a big problem because they changed where the Lord's Supper table went. And Scott was like, so? I mean, oh, yes, that's terribly serious. But I mean, he had to work with it and say, it's no big deal. Sometimes we look at change as, it's going to ruin everything. When we look at, like the thing with the ham lady, the lady and her ham, that sounded bad. What we also have to think about is change has to be for a reason. There has to be some sort of perspective on what it is that we're changing, why we're changing it, and what's our ultimate motive. Look over, well, you probably don't even have to look over there, but Philippians 4. Philippians 4:13 is one of the most well-known verses there is. And it's in a context, I believe, a context of contentment and Paul being satisfied with that. He's like, I don't care if I'm in prison, everything's okay. But Philippians 4:13 is, like I said, super well known. But Paul says that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And like I said, that is one of the most taken out of context verses too. But again, the principle is a good idea, and I'm going to take it out of context too. So, what is Paul saying? Let's think about the idea of change. What is Paul saying, or what can we take from what Paul says when it comes to the idea of changing our lives spiritually, improving ourselves spiritually? When Paul says, I can do all things, what does that tell us about what we're trying to do?
We can do anything as long as we seek God's guidance.
Yeah. That whatever change that we're trying to make, as long as we're doing it for the right reasons, putting God right in the middle of it, that we can do it. I mean, that if I want to be better in my personal prayer life, I can make that change. If I want to be better at Bible study, I can make that change. It may be a challenge. I mean, it may be hard for me to do that. But with this idea, I can do all things. Again, like I said, in a just a general principle, it tells us that change is possible for us. That we can have that positive outlook about it. The whole concept of I can do is, in my opinion, I don't even say my opinion. I mean, Paul says it. It's vital for us as a church. It's vital for us as individual Christians. But it's super important for us as a body of believers, whether it's us here or wherever, that when we think about the task that's before us, I mean, the fact that we're supposed to go into all the world. I mean, that's one of those things that we hear that, we talk about that. I mean, you've heard it a zillion times. But do we do that? I mean, how evangelistic are we really? I mean, do we spend the time that we ought to in trying to get to know our neighbors and try and get to know the people around us, people we work with, so we can tell them what it means to be what God has offered them? It's weird and it's hard and it makes us uncomfortable, but we think about this idea, I can do that. I mean, that's a change that I think a lot of us, I mean, myself included, that a change in our thinking that is really hard when it comes to the idea of sharing my faith, when it comes to the idea of whatever, excelling in some sort of spiritual discipline. It's hard, but the idea that we take from Paul is that we can do it. You think about us as a body, whether it's this congregation here or any group of believers, any group, any church body. We have to realize, like for us, we're different. We're not as different as some congregations with our diversity, but individually, I mean, everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different talent. Everybody has different resources. But we have to look at our, we have to look at who we are and say, whatever we're going to try and accomplish, whether it's outreach, whether it's, encouraging each other, edifying each other, supporting each other in times of trials or times of struggles, we can do it. We can pool all of our mess that we all are, and we can overcome our obstacles. We can overcome our challenges because we have this idea that as a body of Christians with God in the middle of everything we do, we can do this. When it comes to making changes, like in a congregation, I mean, whether it's, like deciding to hire a youth minister. There was a time probably when if you'd have brought up Linda Road hiring a youth minister, people would have went, what? They're going to do what? Because it just wasn't something that Linda Road would have done. I mean, weren't big enough, didn't have the capacity. What is the biggest challenge to making changes? People being stuck in tradition, being stuck in what's normal, just the unwillingness to change. Is unwillingness a word? It is now because it's right there. So I typed that and I was like, no, it's inwilling. No, that's not a word for sure. So there it is. But it's not being willing to deal with the change. I know, whatever it was, 8-9 years ago, when we were trying to figure out classroom space and had this idea to, that was there. Whatever we did over here and kind of restructured the thing. At first it was like, we can't do that. You can't just chop up the building and make new classrooms. And then we did it and it was like, it works great. But at first there's kind of a, what are we doing? We can't just put walls up. But I mean, that's not that huge of a deal. But you think about some of the big changes that some congregations have to deal with. Really, it comes down to the changes that each individual has to deal with. But it's just that, I mean, I don't want to use the word stubborn because that sounds negative, but that's really kind of what it is this is what we've always done. One of the congregations I worked with in the past was very unwilling to change anything. We wanted to do outreach. And there was a group of people who had been in that congregation for a long time who were like, it's not, what if we could start getting a lot of visitors? It's like, oh no, how terrible would that be? But I always think of, this is my go-to change illustration, and this isn't a lie preacher story, this is for real. I worked in this farm supply store in Stillwater when I was going to school. And we sold like electrical wire that goes from a pole to your barn or whatever. And we had it on these gigantic spools that were like a bazillion pounds apiece. And the way that we would unspool the wire is we'd have one guy raise it up on, like stick a pole through the middle of it and raise it up, and the other guy would pull it, so you just kind of let it roll. And it was dangerous. It was stupid. So me and this one guy, one winter day, we were like bored. There was nothing to happen in the store. We decided we're going to make a rack. We had this giant steel rack without, it'll easily hold those. We start making this, and our boss, the owner of the store, comes. He goes, "What are you guys doing?" I told him what we're doing. We said, "We're making this rack." And he goes, "Well, you got other things to do?" And I'm like, "No, the store's totally dead. It's winter. There's nothing happening." And he goes, "Well, that's kind of a waste of time." And we're like, "No, it's really smart." And I said, "We've been doing this dumb way that we try and unspool it." And he goes, "Well, we've been doing it for years and nobody's got hurt." And I was like, "Well, that's perfect then." I mean, that was the motivation is, well, we've been doing it forever and nobody's died yet, so it must be great. Brad.
There's a quote by Henry Ford that I really like. He says, a farmer will, bail water back and forth, water his animals for years instead of just installing a few feet of pipe.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's truth to that. I mean, there's something about us, just as people, that when we decide we're going to make any sort of change, but certainly a major change, that we get sweaty hands, we get all nervous about it. But when we think about it from a spiritual perspective, I guess maybe even the first step of making a change is having a positive attitude about it, deciding that I can do this. The next idea, when we think about making a change of ourselves, it tells us that I'm not satisfied with where I am. And that in and of itself, that sounds negative. And again, I'm not sure if you're supposed to write not a negative, or should I just say it's positive? Is it not a negative, kind of a double negative? Anyway, we think about, we look at ourselves and go, okay, I can be better at this, I can be better at that. That's a positive thing. When we decide that I need to make a certain change. Look over to Luke chapter 18. Luke 18, this is kind of an uncomfortable setting, actually, the whole situation. Luke 18, start in verse 9. How far do I go? 9 to 14. He also told this parable, Jesus is the he here, told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and looked down on everyone else. This is what here's the parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee was standing and praying like this about himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, greedy, unrighteous, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of everything I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest and saying, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you, this one went down to his house justified rather than the other, because everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Like I said, that to me is one of the more poignant illustrations and parables that Jesus uses, because it's so it's almost hyperbole, because surely you wouldn't see a Pharisee really saying, look how great I am. But you kind of did. You kind of saw that in the Pharisees' actions all the time. But the point Jesus is making is one of them understood that they could be better. The other one decided they were all right where they were. So when we think about making change spiritually, being self-satisfied, being self-righteous, being pious, is not going to get us to where we improve spiritually. Did the Pharisee think there was anything he needed to do differently? What does Jesus say in Matthew 23 about the Pharisees? I mean, he's talking to a group of them. What does he say to them over and over? Woe to you. In other words, you people are clueless. I mean, that would be the colloquialism of that. Is Jesus says you don't even know who you are. I mean, you do this, but you're really this. You cover the outside of yourselves, but inside you're terrible. The tax collector in Jesus' parable, though, is the one who says, "Have mercy on me, a sinner." He gets that there's differences. There are differences he needs to make in his life, changes he needs to make in his life. When we decide that we look at ourselves and we say, I'm not happy where I am, there's this I need to do better, What's our motivation for that? What motivates us to change? Whether it's, let's just say, theoretically, let's say we're dealing with a sin, and we want to remove that from our life. We want to change that aspect of our life. What's our motivation for that? Being discontent. What else? Working to better yourself. What else? Seeing others being positive. Let's say, again, just theoretically, we've got a sin we're dealing with. We're going to move out of it because it's the right thing to do. We want to better ourselves. We're not content. We've got other people supporting us. Ultimately, though, don't we have to know that God's going to forgive us? I mean, if we can't look in Scripture and see that God forgives and forgives and forgives, we're not going to be motivated to make a change. Because what's the point? We're going to go to God and say, all right, I'm sorry, I need to be better at this, I need to stop doing this, whatever. And if we can't be sure that God's going to let that go, then it's going to be even worse. It's going to be harder for us to change. When we think about, yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes it's not just about knowing that God forgives you. Sometimes we know that, but it's hard for us to forgive ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And so we keep taking it back from God in that way because we're not just letting Him have that.
Yeah, what you said is that part of that is not just realizing that God forgives. Because I think we can all get that intellectually. You know, we go, yeah, God forgives. It says in the Bible, God will forgive us. But then it's the hard part, she says, is forgiving ourselves. Is that, and I like the expression you use there, that we take that back from God. And that is so true that we say, okay, God, I'm putting this out of my life. I'm going to get over it. I'm going to move on beyond that. Ask you to forgive me. And you sit there and go, okay, God's going to forgive me. And then, a couple days later, you're going, yeah, but I'm still that same person. And you still beat yourself up with it. So, yeah, that part of that, or I guess a key element of being willing to make changes, to being able to make changes, is knowing that God's going to let it go. That, I mean, even if it's not some sin that you're trying to get past, I guess, even if it's just trying to be better at, being more into your Bible more, being a better prayer, being more friendly or whatever, that knowing that God can help you through that. Again, it goes back to Philippians 4:13. I can do whatever it is that I'm going to change because God's right there with me. So it's not only having the confidence to change or the attitude being able to change, but it's that understanding that being discontent, the word Brad used, being discontent is okay. I mean, as long as you're not just beating yourself up about whatever it is that you're dealing with. So let me ask you this. When it comes to this idea of I'm not satisfied with where I am, is that okay for us to think as Christians?
Depends on the realm.
What do you mean?
Well, we're talking about my house or my car.
Yeah.
We're talking about material things, we're probably content.
And that's exactly what he says. We're talking about material things, then yeah, we need to be content, which is exactly Philippians 4:13. Whatever state I'm in, I've learned to be content. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But when we think about, I'll just throw this at you. What's the difference between being content and being complacent? Content, being happy with what God has given you.
To me, complacent is more like, well, I did it myself, and more of a me kind of thought than God has blessed me.
A little more me focused. Well, thinking spiritually. Let's even get away from physical things, material things. Go ahead.
Think about the parable of the talents.
Mm-hmm.
The guy in the middle, who got the middle amount,
Yeah.
he was content. He could have been discontent and said, why didn't I get as much as the first guy?
Yeah.
But he wasn't complacent like the last guy who turned around and buried his talent.
Yeah.
Right? So that guy was content. He was given not the largest, not the smallest amount, but he still took it and did something good with it. But he wasn't complacent like that last guy who turned around and buried it.
Yeah. Yeah, what Adam's talking about, the parable of the talents, where you get the guys with the different amounts. that's, one was content. He was content. The other was complacent. I guess the third guy was overzealous or whatever. He was a go-getter.
I feel like being content, you accept what you have and you work with that.
Mm-hmm.
But being complacent, you're just kind of like, I feel like it's almost indifference. You're just kind of like,
Yeah.
well, I've got it, and like that's a fact, but you're not really like satisfied necessarily.
Yeah, kind of an indifference. What? Go ahead.
Settling.
Settling. That's what I have written right there.
Yeah, resign to the fact that it is, but you're not happy about it.
Okay. What she said, resign to the fact that this is what it is, and you're just going to be happy about it, or you're not happy.
You're just not happy. You're
Just
content is being happy and satisfied. Complacent is like, yeah, it is what it is, but I'm not.
it is what it is. That's what I think. That's what I think we deal with sometimes spiritually, is that we say, well, I try and read my Bible. I read my Bible like 2-3 times a month. Easy. I mean, I read like 9 verses at a time. And that's about all I can do. But we put it in those terms of I'm content with my spiritual life. When really, if we think about it, that's kind of a complacency. Where we say, I understand that I could be better, but I'm not really going to try and do anything about it because it's just how I am. I mean, and like I said, I don't mean that. Well, yeah, I do. I was going to say I don't mean that negatively, but I do. And like I say, I'm guilty of that sometimes. Where I say, I know I need to pray more, and then I think, okay, for a week, like I'll pray as soon as I get up in the mornings. I'll pray when I get in the office, and then like a week later, it's like, yeah, I prayed at dinner, and you kind of go, well, But we kind of settle. We get in kind of a routine spiritually, realizing that we can make changes in a positive way helps us deal with that idea of I'm not happy where I am, but that doesn't mean I think I'm a terrible person, right? Brad.
That idea of if you're not growing or dying.
Yeah.
It works in business, but I think it also works.
Oh yeah, totally. It's improving is always necessary. That goes right to the next thing. Change recognizes when we decide we're going to change that we recognize that we have room for growth. 2 Peter 3:18. Peter says something really smart that I should have marked. 2 Peter 3:18 says, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be the glory both now and in the day of eternity. Who's Peter writing to? It's really easy. Who are these people? I don't mean where they're from. What type of people are they? They're Christians. But he says grow. You go back to the first chapter of 2 Peter 1:5. But add to your faith. Make every effort to supplement your faith with goodness with knowledge with self-control. And he's saying add all this. Again, he's writing to Christians and he says, keep growing. Keep changing. And that's really something that we need to keep in mind. That when we mature spiritually, from whatever point we start to whatever point we are, even at that point, there's so much room for growth. It's funny, not funny. It's interesting for me to talk to my parents. My dad, both my parents are 83 or 84. I don't remember, but I talked to my dad. My dad, they worship in this little bitty congregation, so my dad teaches class kind of year round, and it's fun. My dad is a Bible student, but it's funny to talk to him, and he'll be talking about he's teaching Mark or whatever, and he'll go, I don't even know, I don't remember reading that. This is one of those things I never really thought about before. It's like, dude, you've been reading the Bible since, your whole life. But that's it. That's what we're supposed to be, as people who continue to add to our faith, these certain characteristics, to continue to grow and to continue to mature. And then this idea, we've talked about this before. Let me add to that. Hebrews 5 talks about you ought to be teachers, but you're not there yet. And the whole point of that, Hebrews 5:11 through 14, is the Hebrew writer is saying you should have matured more, but you're stuck where you are. It's a complacency that he's dealing with in whoever these people, these Hebrews are. He's saying you ought to have matured further along than you are, but you're just kind of happy sitting there. And he's saying you needn't be that way. we talked about the idea of challenges a couple weeks ago. Change, when we decide it's time to change, we look at those obstacles as steps to growing, as ways to improve, going up to a higher place, a better place spiritually. One of the things that, I guess, to tie back into the first idea, when we think about, I want to be better spiritually, I want to be a better, better Bible student, I want to be more friendly, I want to be nicer to my wife and kids or whatever. Then we deal with the obstacles. We say, well, yeah, I tried to change, I tried to be better with these people at work, and that guy's just such a jerk, I just couldn't do. That's a challenge, but in order for us to improve and to make those changes, we have to face those challenges as ways to make ourselves better spiritually. And again, and it goes back to that idea of what Paul says, that I can do this. That whatever your change is, on a personal level, or whatever our change is for us as a congregation. As a congregation, we've changed a lot in the last, I've been here 13 years. We've changed a lot in 13 years. You go back 15 years before that, this congregation has changed a ton. But we have to deal with that. We have to have that attitude, that outlook that says, if it's a positive change that's going to improve me spiritually, it's going to improve our outreach, our impact, we have to deal with it. We have to have a positive view of that. Negative. There's a lot of negative thinking toward change. The late 80s, early 90s, the term that you saw a lot in church literature was change agents. People who are trying to change everything. And that was a stigma. That was like if you got branded a change agent, you were terrible. You know who the biggest change agent ever was? Probably Jesus. He changed everything. And he went around, you talk about, when he's accosted by the Pharisees for his apostles eating grains of wheat, he's like, you're so stuck in whatever that is that you're not seeing the bigger picture. So when we think about personal change, congregational change, we have to remember that if it's good and God's behind it, it goes back to that idea that we can do it. So for each of us, whatever we need to improve spiritually, we just need to remember that we can make this change because God's with us. Any thoughts? I way rambled, but I finished the lesson. That's what matters. All right, thanks.